You're tuned into 9 to 5 Work Rebels with your host, Ebony Gale. This series is sponsored by the PRCA's Race and Ethnicity Equity Board. To learn more about REEB and its mentoring scheme, visit prca.org.uk/REEB.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gems in Comms series special, brought to you by 9 to 5 Work Rebels podcast. I am your host, Ebony Gale, and today I'm really excited to be speaking with Sheeraz Gulsher, who is the co-founder of People Like Us and Braver, about his journey in the PR, comms, marketing, creative industry. So welcome, Sheeraz.
Thank you very much, Ebony. And what's up, Gems in Comms? It's good to be here.
You are most welcome. It's great to have you here. And as a way to start off, I always like to start off by saying, essentially, I created this series special to give people of color working within our industry their flowers, because essentially, you've carved out a great piece of the pie for yourself. We know that when we talk about statistics, we all know that it's majority white industry within these industries, comms, PR, advertising, marketing. But we also know that there's a lot of us who are out here who are doing some great work as well. So my kind of passion was to try and, share our stories. We always are in the business of storytelling other people's stories. So I'm like, well, what about our own? Let's share our own experiences as a way to help people to come in, but also for those who are working in the industry and who are in positions of power to learn from some of the things that we've experienced as well, to, take some tips on what not to do, but also what to do, because of the questions I ask. So again, thank you for coming on and sharing your, lived experience. Really, really appreciate it. And kudos to you for carving out a piece of the pie for yourself as well.
Big up. I appreciate it. I think this podcast is a fantastic idea. I can't wait to get stuck in.
Well, thank you so much. So we're going to start off with, can you please tell us about yourself? Like, what is it you do? And have you always wanted to work in comms? Like, was that a mission?
Yeah, no, great question. So I'm a 33-year-old British Pakistani PR professional. So I've been in the industry for just over a decade. And my route into PR was a bit of an unusual one. I suppose like most people, I graduated and I just had no idea what to do next. And it was a bit of a funny point in time in my life where there's lots of big changes happening. And actually, after I graduated, the first thing I did was move to China. And I taught English for about 6 months. I was in complete middle of nowhere. And it was a really surreal experience. I was in the countryside. I was the only person in town that was a foreigner. So that brought its own challenges.
Interesting. Yeah, that must have been very interesting for you.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. I really loved it. Initially, it was quite at times a lonely experience. There wasn't many people that spoke English and that I could relate to and have jokes with and things like that. But over time, I managed to make really great pockets of friends, and it was a wonderful experience. And I came back to the UK, and the jobs market at the time, it was around 2012, 2013, was just really rough. There wasn't jobs going. The economy was in a rough patch, and it was hard. And like initially, the first few jobs I did when I came back, I took anything I got. I worked in a takeaway. I was cleaning like waiting tables, bringing out food. I worked in a warehouse. I worked at a Superdrug warehouse, which was definitely one of the most soul-destroying experiences.
Really?
Yeah, it was really Big Brother-esque, actually. You kind of always constantly watched, and you have to work extremely efficiently. And the shift times were, pretty brutal. You kind of have to get there at the warehouse at like 5 a.m.
Wow.
You have a really lengthy shift, and you kind of pick and pack boxes of lipstick, makeup all day. It's very repetitive, very monotonous. Yeah. And I remember being there and thinking, oh God, like I did 3 years of an English lit degree. I feel like I did fairly well for myself at school. I said, oh, man, is this it? And I was actually also supply teaching because I loved my experience in China. I taught English.
Yeah.
I came to and I grew up in Luton, so I was sort of living with my mum at the time, and I was supply teaching at a few, what some might perceive as rough schools, but I loved it. I really got on with the kids. We really had a great rapport. I enjoyed that. But it wasn't a long-term plan for me, but I really enjoyed my experience there. And PR, it was actually inspired by my brother. So he'd been in the industry for for a lot longer than I have, and he's done exceptionally well for himself. And yeah, so even his career was he was at MySpace in Australia when that was a huge sort of social platform. He came to the UK and he sort of headed up marketing internationally for LinkedIn. And he's just always been my sort of
Yeah,
North Star.
great. Yeah.
Someone I deeply respect and look up to even to this day.
Mm.
And he was always trying to twist my arm, say, hey, look, I think PR could be something quite cool for you. Like, give it a try. I resisted initially, and then I thought, you know what, why not? I'll throw my hat in the ring. But at the time, there was nothing going. There was lots of unpaid internships
Yeah.
in central London, and living in Luton with my mum, not earning very much. Actually, even the commuting cost itself was massive, and
Yeah.
there was no way, didn't have any friends or relatives I could crash in with in London. And yeah, so it was really difficult to get that first break. And eventually, I wrote to tons and tons of agencies, like just practically begging for a shot. It's just like, let me show you what I can do. I'm just keen to learn and hungry. And eventually, one tiny, tiny agency in St. Albans said, you know what, fine, we'll give you a 3-month internship. And yeah, that was the start of something great for me. And yeah, kind of since then, I kind of rolled on, worked at lots of PR agencies. Had a great experience. Then I ended up going in-house for a couple of years. First at Snapchat, and then looking after comms across EMEA, and then at Sky. And then, yeah, about a year ago, I set up my own thing. And in amidst all that, about 5 years ago, I set up People Like Us.
Yeah.
Kind of based on my experiences in the industry and to try and see if I could, my brother and I, we launched it together. If we could even try and improve representation and belonging in our industry, even in a tiny way, that was sort of our mission. We kind of, things kind of snowball from there, really.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's great. And we know People Like Us is definitely a great resource and a great help for many people out there. So well done. And that's an interesting journey into the industry in itself, you know. So you kind of, your brother was definitely a massive influence there, you would say. So once you did get into doing your internship, what kind of attracted you to stay in the industry? Like, what did you like about it?
It was a variety of work really that really attracted me. I started off learning a lot about social media marketing and working with influencers. It was very early days at that point. People weren't fully utilizing it and brands across different platforms. And I loved it. And after that 3-month internship, funnily enough, my boss at the time, I was desperately hoping he would turn it into a full-time role. He took me for a walk on my last day and said, actually, I don't think PR is for you, mate. And he's like, maybe you should go into sales or something like that. I was just like, maybe it was out of spite and like I wanted to actually prove him wrong. But not long after that, at that time, a friend of mine forwarded me a link to the Taylor Bennett Foundation. So after my 3-month experience, I applied for the Taylor Bennett Foundation, which was really competitive and managed to really luckily get in. And it was just a wonderful experience. It really it really gave me a good grounding in the comms, different types of PR, different sectors, and it was unbelievable. It was such a worthwhile experience, and that program is still going strong to this day.
It is.
So I'd recommend any of your listeners that are thinking about a career in comms, definitely check that out. There's some great similar programs as well. There's one called the Brixton Finishing School, which is probably more like widely for creatives generally. But it really set me up. It gave me the grounding and understanding in comms, and actually even friends on the program are still friends to this day. So it was wonderful. And then it kind of just rolled on from agency to agency from there, really.
Okay.
And that's where it took me.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. So going back slightly, I always like to ask all my guests this question. And it's basically, when did you become aware of your ethnicity in the world as a whole? Because I always talk about my experience of going to secondary school, obviously being very aware that I'm a Black girl, but going to secondary school and then hearing about Chelsea Smilers, who used to get a razor and cut you from sort of one side to the other. And, Black and brown people only, of course. So I was definitely mortified because it was like, okay, it's met me in my world. You've watched things like I have heard of and watched things like Mississippi burning and lots of things that would happen and lots of things. I knew things about, race issues, but it was, I suppose, a moment where it collided with my world. And it was a bit like, oh, okay, this is a moment where, people really want to hurt me because of my skin, not any other reason, just because I'm in this beautiful brown skin. very, very stark moment for me as a young girl heading off to secondary school in the first year. What about yourself? Do you have any kind of like moments that kind of stick out to you?
Yeah, I suppose not too dissimilar. I mean, firstly, in your example, that's just a hell of a lot to contend with at such a young age. But yeah, it wouldn't be too dissimilar for me, actually. I was really lucky growing up in Luton. I feel, looking in hindsight, often it's rated I think it's called the shittest town in the UK. But it's home to me. And what made it a privilege was my neighborhood was packed with kids from completely different backgrounds. The majority of my school were kids from Bangladeshi, Pakistani,
Yeah.
Indian, Sri Lankan, Polish, Jamaican, Somali like backgrounds, and it was wonderful. I got to have a glimpse into so many different cultures. I learned bits and pieces of languages, particularly quite nasty insults as you do as kids
Mhm.
in lots of different languages. And it was, you know what, it was a really wonderful time to grow up. I suppose when I became hyper aware of ethnicity was probably 2 points. I think 9/11 was a really big part of my growing up.
Okay.
Suddenly noticed attitudes and like towards people that looked like me
Yeah.
shift very suddenly, and there was just a huge like momentum on that straight after with the absolute atrocities we saw in Iraq, where nearly a million Iraqis were killed, and for no good reason. It was
Yeah.
horrific. And then you kind of noticed it in real life. Like I'd get stopped and searched quite a lot. I'd get looks from people. And even to this day, I still get my suitcases turned inside out at airports, or I'm the only person that's randomly searched. But yeah, I think 9/11 was definitely a big point. The other point
Yeah.
was, I suppose for me personally, I think protests and demonstration has been a big and important part of my life.
Mhm.
And perhaps the first one I went to must have been about 12 or 13. And actually, it was the members of the EDL came to Luton, and I can't remember exactly what it was a counter protest to. But there's
Mm.
an area strip in Luton called Bury Park, which is incredibly diverse. You get sort of food and fashion and everything from like huge breadth of backgrounds, and it's a very diverse area.
Mm.
It's just by the football stadium. And I can vividly recall being at one of these demonstrations, and there's just a line of sort of police horses separating these two groups. And on one side, it was lots of people like locals who are like very sort of like anti-racism, lots of kids I went to school with, lots of great sort of protesters. On the other side, it's just a shitload of dudes who are just very drunk and just very pissed off
Yeah.
and shouting all kinds of slurs, throwing shit. And yeah, it was quite I suppose, yeah, coming of age experience. You're still naive to the world as a kid, and you're thinking, have I done something so bad
Yeah.
that you've got people, do you know what I mean, chanting things and throwing things and actually quite visibly quite violent.
Mm.
So yeah, those are probably the first times like where sort of ethnicity like came into my mind.
Yeah.
Obviously, naturally as a kid, like you grow up with so many different cultures, and I was lucky with my family. They're just so welcoming and so open. So my brothers had lots of friends. You'd get people from all backgrounds in and out of our house, and it was a real privilege and pleasure to experience that as a kid. I don't think not many people get to grow up that way. Yeah, so yeah, probably those two times for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but really, thank you for sharing that. And I get it as well in terms of seeing the protests. I also remember seeing like back in the day, it would be like NF come down in certain parts near my school. So yeah, I remember that feeling of being like looking like what is wrong with these kind of drunk and very angry people over here. And then you've got others on the other side that are like, like you said, multicultural and just really happy to be around each other. And it's just, yeah, as a child, it's a lot to kind of like, process. And as you say, as an adult, I didn't even think about that, but you're so right. The airport, the amount of times that, you might get taken to the side. It's happened to me before where I've been asked to go through the extra security part, or I've come back from Jamaica. I remember coming back from Jamaica and the customs guy saying to me, oh, enjoy your holiday. Excuse me, I'm back home. Like, it's after rifling through all my stuff and it's just like, really, like, yeah. So when you just said that, I thought, oh yeah. And the stop and search, I know for black and brown people, it is quite high. The stop and search situation. So thank you for sharing those examples. Now, bringing it to the workplace, have you ever felt like race, ethnicity has held you back in your career at any point in time? And have you ever experienced or witness racism in the workplace?
Yeah, I suppose like the big challenge I had is one of the main reasons we started People Like Us was throughout my career, I was often the only person in the room that looked like me. And I know a lot of your listeners will be able to relate to that. And I was lucky in one sense. I had my brother who I could sort of lean on and who'd be an inspiration to me. But what that meant in my day to day was, one, I didn't feel like there was perhaps people that could relate to me on a different kind of level. And perhaps I felt left out at times, and I was afraid to ask questions. I was afraid for people to see that I wasn't quite as clued up as them, or perhaps I didn't have the level of connections or education that they did at the time. And yeah, it can be quite an isolating experience because you kind of think, you look ahead at the board of an agency or an organization or even your clients and think, there's not a single person here that isn't white. What does that mean for my career trajectory? What does that mean for my future? Could I be a director at this great agency, or could I work in-house someday? And it was tough. And there's definitely been instances in my career where people have treated me differently because of the color of my skin. I can give you countless examples. But I would say the more painful ones are the more covert ones. People who are quite trained in, maybe trained's not the right word, people are quite tactical with how they sort of weigh you down over time and keep things off emails and messages, but actually behave with you quite visibly differently in a room compared to other people. And that's happened to me at lots of different points in my career. And yeah, that was a big catalyst for starting People Like Us, really. We thought we didn't know any other people that looked like us in the industry, and we knew they existed. We knew that people were doing fantastic things, and that really inspired us to actually just bring them together but also make it fun. I think there's a lot to be said about activism and community that's enjoyable. That's something people look forward to.
True.
Because certainly before we started People Like Us in 2019, the events and sort of industry bodies and that did events and D&I, at least the ones I knew about, were quite frankly quite boring and quite worthy and quite depressing. Kind of hear time and time again about stats around representation and how that hasn't changed over the years. And I mean, people aren't getting to the senior leadership positions. And yeah, we kind of, let's flip the script. Let's put our own sort of energy and vibes into it, and also create something that's tangibly going to make a little bit of a difference, even a minuscule difference. And we kind of set our way about it. And actually, over the years, we've supported hundreds of individuals that have faced discrimination in the workplace. Sometimes it could be a bit more covert. Sometimes it's so direct and overt that often very heartbreaking to hear about. So it's something we support people with over the years, and something I've definitely come across. And I suppose my personal position on it, I have a pretty thick skin, but also I'm not afraid to call things out and have those uncomfortable conversations. I certainly wasn't geared up to deal with it early in my career. I think it was sort of keep your head down, get things done, learn as much as you can, and move on. There was definitely a couple of times early in my career where I nearly snapped and thought, I'm not having this. There was one time I had a manager who was, for whatever reason, just did not like me. And despite the work I did, the receipts I had, and all this sort of stuff, and it came to the moment where I knew he was practically colluding against me. And yeah, it was, and you kind of know it, but actually finding the evidence for it was a bit of a
harder.
Yeah, it was a bit of a turning point for me. And actually, I had put up with a hell of a lot, and then it reached boiling point to a day, and I kind of confronted him, and I wish I'd done it sooner. Kind of confronted him, and he was sort of a deer in headlights, and I kind of, a bit of Luton came out of me. It was just like,
good for you.
Yeah, it's just like, what the fuck's your issue? And you know what I mean, like, if you've got an issue with me, take it up with me directly. You're kind of working around me with your seniors and, do you know what I mean, other people. That's going to impact my career, my progression. And yeah, he kind of crumbled, and it kind of like, yeah, you have this perception of someone that, oh god, they're more senior than me, they can do this to me, they can do that to me. But in that moment, I kind of realized, well, you don't have any power over me. Like, I could thrive with or without you. And yeah, in many respects, I feel sorry for you. You feel threatened by me and my success because I'm younger. I'm bringing a different perspective to the room. So yeah, unfortunately it happens.
It
But
does happen
yeah, that's
sometimes.
what we're hoping. Yeah, it happens to the best of us, and yeah, particularly like like experiences speaking to people, particularly women and women of color, definitely
Mhm.
get it a hell of a lot more.
Yeah,
And it's really important that people have a network they can lean on, and people that will have their backs. And yeah, that was the
absolutely.
inspiration.
Absolutely.
That
No,
was
thanks
the,
for sharing that. Because I was going to ask you, how was it handled? But it's not like you handled it yourself in that predicament. You confronted the issue. And I'd say, well done to you for doing that. But I also acknowledge what you said, which is at the beginning, it was, even though I felt comfortable to do that. And it was the same for me. When I first started out, you wouldn't feel comfortable to just push back because you're still in that space of trying to navigate. You're the only one who looks like you in the room anyway. So that alone is like you're standing out. Then you're questioning, like, am I seeing this? Is this real? You know, there's things that I get, that kind of thought process before we get to, and also I suppose not only the evolution of your thought process, but with your experience being in the industry and then actually recognizing, no, my voice is important, and yeah, I'm going to stand on this. You know, not everyone's comfortable to do that, so I'd say well done to you for being able to take up and approach it, talk to the person, and actually see him crumble, which actually I'm sure empowered you slightly more because we do. It reminds me of the whole you know, what's that show? Yellow Brick Road. Yellow Brick Road. And she gets there and she thinks this big scary thing, and it's just a small guy behind the computer. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, well, we
of
can
course it is.
sometimes build them up that big, and it's like, actually, no. We're human. If you fall down and scrape your knee, we'll both bleed. So let's just be real here. So
100%. That's a brilliant way of putting it. We are all human beings. I think so many
yeah,
people can get caught up in the sort of politics and in that sort of work arena.
yeah,
And you know what I mean? Someone like me who was not geared up for it or not experienced in, you know what I mean, handling these conversations, and someone who actually actively avoids politics, even in my personal life and family and friends, it's just not for me.
yeah,
Uh, Sort of minimal drama and get on with it type of guy.
yeah.
People do get caught up in this sort of work persona, but yeah, fundamentally we are people with feelings and
That's
hopes
it.
and dreams, and yeah, we deserve a fair chance to succeed.
Absolutely, absolutely agree with you. So, looking over your career, was there ever a time where you wished that you had spoken up about something in the past, or when you wished you'd self advocated a bit more? I mean, you did. I mean, that's a great example that you just gave. So, I feel like you self advocated there, great. But is there any time where you maybe wish you spoke up for somebody else, or maybe something else that you sit back and think, oh, I wish I kind of handled that a little bit differently now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, like when I've experienced it, I think when it comes to other people, I'm quick to jump in and do you know what I mean, that I think that's just in my nature to hop in and support however they need it. Yeah, it just points to my career where I saw a lot of red flags, and it took me too long to start to action things, perhaps
Mm,
against people who I perceive to be far more senior, far more powerful, holding a lot more influence.
yeah,
That's probably my only regret. So when I was coming to me personally and I was experiencing it, um, yeah, perhaps like actually recognizing things sooner, but it's
yeah,
like recognizing bad behavior and being quicker to do something about it. But there were
yeah,
times I did do that, and the powers that be perhaps didn't act appropriately. So it's kind of knowing like what's in your control, and yeah, not worrying about things that are outside your control. And
yeah,
when it's not the right place for you anymore, then yeah, for me personally, I'm not afraid to say, actually, this is the end of the line for me. Thank you and goodbye. Um, but actually, there's lots of people that have been receptive to it. I remember around the time of the murder of George Floyd, there was a huge amount of, I suppose, buzz and momentum. For me, it's like for many, it's a generation-defining moment. There was a big pause, and everyone thought, "Wow!" Like suddenly realized struggles that Black people face across the
mm,
world, and then it kind of for more wider people of color, actually there are so many barriers in place, and we ought to do something about it. And people were receptive. And at the time, there's lots of sort of redundancies happening because of COVID and layoffs and what's that word when during COVID when people used to get paid like some of their
oh,
salary.
sabbaticals.
I think so. Yeah, there
When
was
they,
a
you mean when they were going on, I know what you're talking about, when they had a certain word, didn't they, for it?
yeah. Well, our listeners will definitely know what it is. But I remember at the time I was working with a few companies, and I definitely noticed, and it was clear as day, that In fact, the ones that were like front in the firing line were people of color. And I had called this out with one of the companies I was working with, and in full respect to them, they recognized it and they started investigating their biases, and they took it brilliantly. So there have been instances where companies have worked with individuals who have just been like, wow, like you're absolutely right. Here's what we're going to do.
Right.
We're not going to put the onus on you to do it. It was your, yeah, like great that you brought it up, but it's now on us, the leadership team, to sort our shit out. So that was a great example of that. So it's gone
That's a
kind
good
of both.
example.
Yeah,
You pointed it out and then they still try to work on it. I think that's good. And but then, you know, those sort of ones always throw me, because I'm like, well, had you not pointed it out, would the people still be gotten fired? You know, it's like that. It's that thing where it's like you're caught in the act, so you change your behavior, which is what we want. We want change behavior. But it also gives you that moment of, well, had you not pointed it out, what would have happened? You know, it's really, really interesting. But I think it's important that you do speak up where you feel comfortable. And I understand those who may not always feel comfortable to speak up, and that's also okay. You know, but as long as you're getting some support elsewhere, you know, please do look at supports, definitely. Okay, so thinking about us being in the office, so people of color in particular, do you feel like we will forever be code switching, or do you feel like we can live with our authentic voices in the workplace?
That's a really great question. And it's something I've sort of contended with over the years, actually. It's just like, can I bring my full self? I think to a degree, I struggled with this, like in sort of both cultures, really, because I found in circles growing up, British Pakistani circles, I often at times didn't feel quite Pakistani enough, and in particular parts, like perhaps I'm slightly removed from religion and some parts of the culture, especially when I was growing up. And in the workplace, I wasn't white enough to fit in there. So it left me in a really funny place. I was just like, I'm not Asian enough here, I'm not white enough here. What do I do? And I read this great interview by the actor Riz Ahmed years ago, and he's phenomenal. And yeah, British Pakistani guy. He's just done really, really well for himself. And he talks a bit about code switching. And obviously, I don't want to butcher his quote, but in a nutshell, he says something like, actually being able to code switch is a hell of a skill. Because it almost, I think the way you put it, it gives you like a passport to anywhere. You can come and go as you please. So if I do go see my boys in Luton, I mean, I can turn it on and switch it up. And if I'm in the office, presenting a marketing plan or PR strategy to, my usual customers, then happy days. I loved bringing myself to work. It got to the point where I was confident and comfortable with who I am, and I stopped. And actually, giving less of a fuck made such a difference. It's like, so what if the person thinks like the way I speak is funny, or like if I'm using slang or whatever, it's kind of liberating. So I would say do your thing. I think if you maintain professionalism and you're behaving like as you expect to in the workplace, you should be able to bring your full self to work. And I always think the best companies and best places I've worked at is when you get people from a variety of backgrounds and ways of thinking, and that all collides together beautifully. Some of the best campaigns I've worked on have just been rooms where it's just incredibly diverse people at all levels of the campaign. So yeah, it's about finding a home. And I think for me personally, it was just finding my own confidence. Once I got the sort of bread and butter of PR down, I knew actually I'm going to be pretty damn good at this, and I'm going to work hard to stay good at this. So it's just about finding your place, your people, and also your networks. There's so many great organizations in PR, like the Black Comms Network. There's people like us. There's like lots of the Asian Comms Network. There's lots of important groups where, if you need help finding your people, they will support you in doing that. So I
agree with that. Yeah, definitely.
This series is sponsored by the PRCA's Race and Ethnicity Equity Board. To learn more about REEB and its mentoring scheme, visit prca.org.uk/REEB. So
moving into the industry as a whole, when did you become aware of the color bias in the industry? Like for me, I was in-house. So like some of my earlier roles were in-house. Like, so I worked in the General Medical Council and worked on like the shipment review and all that kind of stuff. So I was very much in-house, but my companies were always diverse to a degree. So I'd be the only person in my team, in the comms team. I was quite aware of that. But until I started to get involved in the industry and go into a lot more industry events, and I was the first Black woman appointed to women PR board. And, being around a lot of these events, I was just like, wow, it's really a sea of white people here. And it was almost like, oh, spot a brown face and then like, oh yeah, hi, kind of thing. And it became more aware to me anyway. And then obviously I looked at the reports and things like that. Obviously, like you said, a lot of talk around statistics and things like that. But for me, it was really definitely coming to the industry. So I don't know, what was it like for you? Or was you already aware of it?
Probably fairly early on. I think my experience with the Taylor Bennett Foundation was a really positive one. Like they obviously framed the context of the industry and why they exist really. They want to include new voices, new perspectives, and they're here solely to support. And yeah, that's their driving force and mission. I'd say probably not so much my early few roles I had. It was kind of smallish companies and it was just kind of everyone sort of mucking in, and it's not something I experienced. But probably, yeah, maybe slightly a few years into my career, I definitely noticed in working with organizations and agencies and brands I really respected. It was very obvious and very visible in the room. And at that time, people weren't really having the conversations that we are now. It was only about 4 years ago that it really became in the forefront and people were actively investing time and efforts into it. So yeah, so fairly early in my career, it was it was like a fantastic agency I joined, but I kind of noticed it very, very early doors.
Okay.
And because I noticed people had their cliques and their circles, and I noticed I was the only one without a clique or a circle. And I'd kind of eat lunch by myself. I would kind of do things by myself and not get invited to things. And I was just like kind of figuring out, I was like, where am I going wrong here? Like, what am I doing? I've been perfectly friendly and whatever to everyone. Like I could have small talk with people, but it took me ages to really find my friends.
Yeah.
When I got to that company, and it was tough. And you know what, even at a point where I kind of genuinely considered leaving the industry entirely, I thought like the work wasn't too tricky, but it's just like, man, I just feel
it's the environment, isn't it? It's so important to feel included. Like, had your experience, I'm just thinking, that's a hard feeling to deal with. And I've been in situations where you start a role and they've got their lunch clicks and they go off, and you're the person that's kind of left behind, and it doesn't feel nice. It almost throws you back to school days, right? So it's like, being left out. And it's a workplace, so it's not supposed to feel that way. So no, I completely understand that. And that's, I'm glad you didn't leave the industry. I'm glad it didn't put you off.
Yeah, I was actively making plans. I even got to the point where I was just like, man, I need to go back to this shitty warehouse job and just earn some money. And I was just like, I just feel a bit alone in this and a bit like, and I kind of stuck it out. My brother just said, look, just go with it. Like something will come of it.
Yeah.
Eventually I finally made some friends, and that was the beginning of something brand new for me, which is great.
Oh, good. That's good. We're glad that you have a happy ending throughout this, so that's great. So, talking about I wanted to touch on the ethnicity pay gap, because the PRCA put out a report. PRCA's Race and Ethnicity Equity Board, they put out a report a couple of years ago actually about it, and they gave out some guidelines. What are your thoughts about the pay gap? I mean, the fact that it still exists is problematic, but what are your thoughts around that?
The ethnicity pay gap has just been a big pillar of activity for people like us over the last 5 years. So yeah, one of the things when we set out was like, we have to try and do things that are demonstrably going to make a difference in the lives of people like us. And the conversation we kept coming back to outside of representation was pay. And just 4.5 years ago, I recall, kind of thinking long and hard about actually how can we address this meaningfully. The things that kept coming back to mind is actually any PR agency anyone has ever visited, the first thing you'll see when you walk in is a bunch of trophies, undoubtedly. So people care so much about being the best at something and being recognized for something. And we're kind of just thinking, actually, how can we make people really, truly care about it? And PR's like top of everything is reputation and managing reputation. So we approached PR Week, good friendship with John Harrington, who's just a wonderful bloke.
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah, and we kind of pitched this idea to him and said, look, what if we try and get a real gauge on pay and representation in the industry, and he was all for it. And at the time, there's no guidance on how to conduct such a study. So since 2017, it is by law, companies with 250 more employees have to report their gender pay gap as part of the Equality Act. And there was nothing by way of similar comparison by ethnicity. So we just came up with our own sort of methodology on how we could address that. We tried to make it as simple as possible. And yeah, we put it into the wild, and we thought, actually, let's see how this goes. And it was a bit scary. I thought, in fact, is anyone going to enter? I think representation is so low in our industry that are people worried about exposing themselves in some way? And thankfully, year one, we had a lot of agencies enter, and it was like more than 30, and it was really exciting. And beyond the numbers, show obviously really important. It's good to understand what representation is like and what pay disparities are by level. But actually the learnings people share, because what we ask is not only people share the numbers, but the best practice, what's working well for them, any shifts in the market, any context that's worth knowing. And yeah, it's been great. And that's been running for 4 years in a row, which we're immensely proud of. This year we had the most number of entries. But actually thank you. And actually after year one, we feel actually we have a pretty solid case here to take this to government. We feel like companies absolutely should report the ethnicity pay gap. Like, why wouldn't they? I think you can only truly create like evidence-based action based on like the data you have. And yeah, pretty much since then we've been campaigning to government, and we've done lots of interesting creative work and lots of research over the past 5 years. And yeah, which has been a lot of fun. And politics and public affairs has never been my background, and I'm very upfront with that. I'm a consumer PR guy. So a lot of it was just learning as I went along. And we applied, and lots of amazing volunteers just put our heads together. Actually, how do we make people understand this topic, and how do we make them care about it? Because it affects so many of us. Yeah, it's been campaigning, getting to MPs. One of our campaigns was backed by Sadiq Khan, people on the shadow cabinet. And yeah, pleased to see this year, as of July, that the government has included ethnicity pay gap reporting as a draft bill. It's a meeting at some point in the near future.
That's brilliant. Hopefully that will definitely, I hope it does get, greenlit. I hope so, because that would be amazing, because to force people to do that would definitely make a change. And no, I appreciate you sharing that. And I love that, because it's about being the change that you want to see. And you guys are definitely illustrating that by pushing that forward. So thank you for your thoughts on that. I wanted to get your thoughts on allyship. So what does it mean to you? To you, what's like a really good example of allyship for you?
Great question. I think for me, quite simply, it's just someone that'll have your back no matter what. And someone that has your best interests in mind, and someone that will stand up for you when it's uncomfortable. That's probably the best definition of it. It's someone that is going to stand up for things that are very uncomfortable, and yeah, support their employees. I think it's especially necessary in our industry, where we've got quite a lot of different sort of challenges going on at the same time. I suppose one is from the ethnic representation point of view, which kind of remains at the 9 or 10% mark. And two, we've got quite a disparity in class. I think PR over indexes in terms of people that were middle class by maybe 3 times more than a lot of other industries, or the national average. And there's lots of different things to contend with there. So I think great allyship is, people that are aware and creating an inclusive environment where everyone can feel like they belong. And really straightforward example of this is, I suppose, what we're guilty of in our industry is centering everything we do around alcohol. And in reality, lots of people won't drink. It could be for religious reasons, it could be for health reasons, or personal, whatever it might be. And just a really simple way to do that is, I think almost every agency I've been to, is just like, if you have a celebration or something bad happens or whatever it might be, it's like, all right, we're going to go to the pub. And that means a bunch of your Muslim colleagues or people that don't drink won't be able to attend or partake. And that's not a sign of a good allyship. So something really straightforward is saying, actually, how can you change up what we do, where Jimmy, our colleague, can also take part, and everyone can have a good time together. So I suppose, like, just sort of being considerate and calling out shit behavior. I think that's, for me, is like the real important part of allyship. Like
Yeah.
it can be horrible and uncomfortable, and it might put you in a difficult situation, but unless we all do that, nothing's really going to change. I think it takes a bit of courage to call something out for being wrong and discriminatory or upsetting, and in whatever form it may be, whether it's race or gender or sexuality or whatever it could be. I think it's important that we all stand up for ourselves and for our colleagues and our friends, because that's what will make a much better sort of society, and also more transparency. I think is from my pay gap hat on. I think the more transparent company cultures definitely make just much positive work environments. So for me, those things are key, really, in terms of allyship. It's just owning and being transparent and actually just creating clear plans. And that's what ethnicity pay gap reporting and gender pay gap reporting is. It gives you a snapshot in time of here's our challenges. I mean, here's where we're going wrong, and here are the active steps we're taking to address these historical disparities. And for me, that's great allyship because you've got like hard evidence that is, I mean, you can't argue against, and actually creating a really almost like creating a, I almost always compare it to like a PR strategy. Kind of identify the problem, and then your strategy is creating the steps to solve that problem and help your client do whatever it might be they want to be known for. And I kind of treat it with the same sort of framework.
Fair, fair. No, thank you for sharing that. I think that you've made some really good points, and I agree, definitely. So, on your journey, what would you say has motivated you, and what inspires you to keep going on your journey?
But people like us, I think it's the little success stories we have that mean more to me than anything. Like it's great to have like engagement from government and pick up some awards and whatever, but it's just those little phone calls that you get from time to time saying, "You connected me with this person, I landed a great job," or I'm much happier now, or you found me a mentor, and they're like hanging out. I love that. After people like us events, I'll flick through my Instagram stories, and I see people who've met through our events just hang out in real life. And for me, that's success. It's connections made. Yeah, well, one story that comes to mind is there was a gentleman we were working with, was supporting 2 or 3 years back. He just had a rotten luck of like jobs. Like one of them, he was made redundant. Another one, he was sort of promised something which didn't materialize in a new job. They weren't particularly nice to him. When we met, he was just really low on confidence, and he was just, yeah, very, very down and out. And yeah, we worked with him. So he spoke at one of our events. We connected with a mentor. And sometimes all you need is just someone to just put their arm around you and say, actually, you're fucking brilliant. You can do
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
And I'll never forget, he called me one morning, just completely out of the blue. And he said, I've got something to tell you. Like, I haven't told my mum yet, but I've just been offered a job at Apple. And
Amazing.
he said, oh, what should I do? And he's, oh, actually, I've got another offer from Amazon, I think it was.
I love it for him.
Yeah, I was just blown away. I was just like, man, like we all told you how good you are, and it's just, I mean, he just needed that little bit of guidance to just so he understood that as well.
Mm,
So for me, it's just these tiny little conversations or little emails or whatever. Like at least we're hoping to make a tiny difference. And yeah,
yeah.
that makes it all worthwhile.
That's lovely. That's beautiful. I love that. I love those little stories as well. I feel like, helping people is something that I enjoy. So I think that makes sense. I love that. And I love that the fact that he went from, going through so much and you guys helped getting back on track. But also, like you said, it just takes one person sometimes to just, remind you that you are valuable and, you bring something wonderful to the table. So I think that's a really nice story to share. So what would you say you found to be most challenging so far in your journey?
Finding my people for sure. I think
Yeah.
finding people on the same wavelength as me.
Yeah.
Um, Not realizing early on that there are like great groups that are there to support you.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's definitely the hardest part of my career journey. It's just like not feeling like I belonged, or not knowing where to turn to for support,
Yeah.
or ask questions or things like that. So thankfully now there are lots of incredible networks and organizations that will support you pro bono and be there for you for whatever you need. But yeah, that was definitely the hard part. It was a very steep learning curve in lots of respects.
Mm.
But it's funny actually that my time in PR, like the work has always been engaging, really interesting, but it's never been so incredibly hard that I wouldn't be able to do it. It's just
Yeah.
like you take the steps to learn it. But actually the hard part has just been, I mean, working in a way where I feel accepted and I found my people. So yeah, the work isn't rocket science. They're obviously a very sophisticated part of comms, which I think you can learn and you can teach. Is you know what I mean? But there are nuances to it. But actually, yeah, for me personally, it was just finding my space in the industry, which took
Yeah.
me some time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that and being honest about that because I think that's important because there's people out there who will, have the same sort of, story. Now, with that in mind, actually, what would you look for? So, for example, when you were looking for roles, because you have your own business now, what was it you were looking for from your employer perspective? Like for you, what looked like a good working environment?
Yeah, I suppose for me, like most of the places I've ended up working at, I'm always attracted by like the type of work they deliver, and that's yeah, like how they're innovating, how they're doing something different or disruptive. Like the work itself is really important to me.
Mhm.
And it sounds really obvious now, but what I failed to realize early in my career was actually you can do comms in whatever you're interested in. I
Yeah,
kind of went bounced from job to job, kind of seeing what accounts I ended up being on and rolling with it and see what happens. Then I kind of realized actually, growing up, I had a big interest in video games and technology, and I knew it like the back of my hand. I understand these communities, I understand different parts of tech. And
yeah,
it sounds really dumb, but it took me 3 or 4 years to realize I was at an agency and say, oh, I'd love to work in video games. And the manager I had was a fantastic manager. He's just like, well, you absolutely can. Why don't we? And then he and I kind of built a breadth of gaming clients for the agency we were at. And it just, yeah, made me fail to realize that, oh, you can absolutely like go after your passions and what are you genuinely interested
yeah,
in. And often it just didn't feel like work. I think when you're working in something you're truly, truly passionate about, it just feels like, yeah, time just flies. It's
mm,
amazing. In terms of people and culture, I think that's the thing I look out for. Look at people's values, what are they actually doing? And I think I'm getting a better eye, maybe the older I get, the more experience I get of who walks the walk and who just talks shit just
yeah,
for a tick box for DNI creds. And I often insisted on meeting people before I accepted any job. So if I had the offer on the table, I'd say, I'd love to just pop in and meet the team for a coffee just to see what the vibe is like and just see if it's, do you know what I mean, something somewhere I can see myself.
yeah,
Um, and that's made a difference. So I think there's only so much you can tell from a website,
mhm,
from an Instagram, and obviously amazing work people are delivering. But you're well within your right if you're applying for a role and you're getting to near off the stage. You can say, I mean, you'd love to just meet people there, and do you know
yeah.
what I mean? Ask them the real questions. Actually, what do they love about working there, and do you know what I mean, what are they hopeful for in the future, and things like that. And do you know what I mean, anyone, yeah, people should be absolutely receptive to that.
Yeah, I
So
think that's a really good tip actually. Asking for, to pop in. I think that's great. It also helps you set your boundaries and you start to see, well, actually, this might be not be the right place. Or actually this is a great place for me. But giving yourself that option is really great. So that's a great tip. Thank you for sharing that, Shiraz. That's a really good tip. And I suppose building on that slightly is what does good DEI look like from your perspective?
great question. I think consistency is probably the key point. I think a great agency or organization that is consistent with their D&I program is really important, and especially one that isn't super reactive. I think we did a piece of research a few years back that said D&I conversations are reliant so much on tragedies. It's the horrible things happening, like the murder of George Floyd or
Very
the
true.
Asian hate,
Yeah.
and I mean the countless examples. And people are just, or even Gaza right now.
Mm,
Um, it's like for me, it's the consistency and the human first sort of approach to it. It's just
yeah.
like it's just that recognition that we're all human beings. We all have completely different beliefs. We all require support. So I think consistency is important, and transparency for me is absolutely crucial. You
Mm,
want to be in a workplace where you can speak up, make suggestions, and call things out respectfully if things aren't like to your where you feel like they should be. And I think having that transparent culture is so important. And there's lots of practical ways you could do that. A company I worked at in-house, they did this one thing that I really appreciated. You could have an ask me anything session with the CEO and the CTO. So you're directly asking them questions. You can either submit anonymously or grab the microphone and say, well, why have you decided to opt for this policy change? Like, why did you I don't know, making redundancies, or why are women being paid less in the company, or whatever. And they had no choice but to, respond to you. So it's really important that the company feels, or employees feel, part of the journey. So if there are big shifts going, they should be able to have a say in things. So I think creating that environment where openness is encouraged is a good thing. And people feel like comfortable. Do you know what I mean? Someone like me would have no qualms about being very open and talk about it in front of lots of people. Sometimes you want to do it more privately, and but having that opportunity to do that is super important. So yeah, for me, it's consistency and just that transparency just makes all the difference.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. And I agree, absolutely. I think being transparent is super important for running any business. So yeah, absolutely. Now moving into your proudest moments. So what would you say has been your proudest moment? It can be work and personal, and what has been a particular career highlight for you?
Wow, that's a really difficult question. I think people like us will always be one of the things I'm most proud of in my life. I think the community, the work, and the difference we've made has just been huge. And I kind of lose track of the things we've done. And yeah, it is a really wonderful community. But maybe I'll give an example of a work example, actually. So slightly mixing it up. But we did a campaign when I was at Snapchat. It was all around educating people around Black British history. It's a campaign. It was a hugely educational campaign for me personally, and also thinking about wider context, because I think there's a huge amount of discussions about the problems with education in secondary school and even beyond. I think colonialism is kind of overlooked, and it's kind of whitewashed. A lot of things that we learn about in school, which aren't factually correct, and it kind of doesn't bring in actually all the countries and people that look like you and I that supported on efforts in the war and beyond. So we had this idea of, so obviously lots of Snapchat users people are pretty young. I think it's like sort of 13 to 18 is quite the sweet spot. And yeah, we had this idea about, could we help educate people using the latest interactive features on the Snapchat camera? In the end, we came up with this concept all around sort of hidden Black stories. And of course, I'm not from a Black background. I'm not an expert in Black British history. I've read a lot about it in my time and at university, but by no means that make me an expert. And what made this campaign authentic is we worked with huge breadth of charities, Black Cultural Archives being the main one. I have a lot of love and respect for Lisa and her team from there. They were brilliant to work with. And they brought in a huge amount of like experts to really give this the rigor and research and due diligence it needed. And like included organizations like the Mary Seacole Trust, Kick It Out. And it was great. It was just like, and what the concept we settled on. So whilst we were the experts in the technology itself, they were the experts in history. So we kind of put our heads together. And we created this interactive experience in Trafalgar Square, where lots of historic things have happened, where Nelson Mandela delivered his famous Make Poverty History speech on the steps just by the National Gallery. And we actually learned there was lots of history in plain sight. For example, in Nelson's column, there was a Black soldier who actually fought right beside Nelson that people don't really talk about. There was a boxer who fought for his freedom nearby, which was a really inspiring story. He was a terrific fighter. So there's all these tiny stories, and the way it worked on the day is you kind of walk out with your Snapchat app and you kind of hover it around and you can see a Nelson Mandela statue appearing. You can hear the audio of his really iconic speech. You can see the person that fought alongside Nelson, and all these tiny little stories and little bits of history. And what made it even more special is we were thinking about spokespeople for the campaign, and we reached out to the Mandela family, and they worked with us, which was really cool. So I got to know his granddaughter. Her name's Takwini. She's wonderful. So spent a few days with her, did lots of media interviews, hung out, had dinner, had drinks, and she told me lots of great stories about her granddad. And I think what made even just different touch points in the campaign, our photographers, our videographers were all people from Black backgrounds, and all the suppliers we worked with, all the influencers, and so on and so forth. We try to make
a great campaign. It sounded amazing. very immersive with the Snapchat filters. So yeah, that was really, really cool. That's a really cool campaign.
Yeah, well, the picture of me and Queenie sits proudly in my pinned tweet on my Twitter. So if any of your viewers want to check it out, we're hanging out by the steps at Trafalgar Square. But yeah, but it brings a lot of good memories to me.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's a really good one. That's a really, really good one. Would you say that was your career highlight you're using as?
It's definitely up there. I think the
Well, that and
other,
people like us, I suppose, right? Because both of those are, yeah. Well, people like
yeah,
us, massive career highlight to me. I'm answering it for you here. I'm like, to me, that's a massive career highlight because of the impact. Do you know what I mean? That you have with people like us. So I feel like that should be definitely in that range.
100%. Yeah, like we've been fortunate. We've worked with great teams over the years. We've picked up lots of industry awards and campaign awards. But yeah, definitely that Mandela campaign has to be up there with some of my finest and
Yeah,
most
that's great.
memorable.
Great work. Okay, so moving forward slightly, I wanted to get your thoughts on the industry and how you see it kind of evolving. So what are your thoughts in terms of how our industry will evolve over the next few years? Because, you know, there's lots of talk around AI. We know AI is already being integrated in certain levels. And so what are your thoughts about, you know, where we're going to, where we're evolving to?
I think from a technology level, I've seen lots of interesting use cases for AI. I think I really hope it can streamline really laborious and boring processes that we all had to go through as juniors. And looking back, even when I was going through the ranks, people don't create like things that we used to, like coverage books, like physical coverage books and
Yeah,
really random brochures and things like that. So thank God that stuff's gone out. But I feel like it's an interesting one. Like even by doing a lot of the like admin type work, I actually learned a lot. Like
so
just doing
true. Yeah, doing
yeah,
mailers and all that kind of stuff, super important. Like, you know,
great. And like even when you're logging like coverage from a massive announcement,
yeah.
I personally love I really enjoy reading all of them. I'm someone that's obsessed with news and like takes pride in knowing, I mean, what publications cover, how they lean differently and all that sort of stuff. But even that was really helpful. But I
Mm,
think if we can cut some of that out to free up junior people in doing new things like meeting press, building influencer contacts,
mm,
that'd be great.
yeah,
The change I really want to see moving forward, like AI and tech aside, is like improvement of senior representation of ethnically diverse working professionals
yeah,
at agencies. I think in-house we've seen some fantastic leaders.
yeah,
I think there is, I couldn't, I don't know the stats to hand, but agencies, we need to see the next generation of like superstars. And it kind of gives like the young folks, you know what I mean, that hope and that trajectory when they come in and say, oh, sweet, there's a black woman who's an MD, or I mean, there's an Asian guy who's on the board and whatever. And I mean, it makes so much difference. That's so hard to capture what it means. Means the world to me when I see. Yesterday I had a meeting at an agency where there was a female Asian MD, and I was genuinely like blown away. And it's a
amazing.
major consultancy, and their marketing director was an Indian lady,
Mm,
and I was just honestly stunned, and I was so happy.
yeah, it
Um,
is
and it
nice.
meant so that would be my hope for the future, really. It's more senior representation. And I think PR agencies need to think hard about, I mean, how they support people through their careers, particularly at the account director type level, and how
Yeah.
to enable them to become the next generation of leaders and support them and give them the opportunities because they absolutely have the ability. They just need the opportunity to shine,
Do
really.
that. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. And I agree with your point, excuse me, about, you know, seeing people of color within these high positions is so encouraging because it's, I mean, even from other podcast interviews I've done, that's come up quite a lot in terms of, you know, having to see these people in these positions give you a bit of inspiration. You know, sometimes you can't, for some people, it's like you can't achieve what you can't see. And that's for others, you know, not so the case because the first people who were at the first obviously didn't have anybody else to see. But there's lots of people who come up and they'll be like, well, if I don't see it, then that means it's not possible. So yeah, it's really important. And I completely agree with you. My next question for you would be, what are some of the key lessons that you've learned throughout your career? Maybe 2 or 3 key lessons that you're like, I've learned that throughout my career and I kind of carry it with me.
I think most important thing, I think when you're at any point in your career, it's just to read as much as you can. I think like people just picking up the papers and even the free ones every day, just read through them. Print and online like shifts yeah, it's different teams and it's often different types of content.
Mm.
It's just like actually even just flicking through the paper, you can start to understand where the opportunities for PR are and how like what does great look like? What does a great campaign look like? What does a great spokesperson say? Listen to the radio, and also just being inspired by different formats as well. I think like PR, like I got to a stage where I was just reading PR stuff and it was just I kind of got tunnel vision and it's really important to just get inspired from different places. There was a company I worked at, and they did this really cool thing once in a while. They would just pay for like really unusual exhibition tickets. So there's something going on at a nearby gallery or a museum or whatever, we would do it just to get inspired in a new way. So getting away from the desk to do that was great. And actually, what I'm doing these days is I'm just trying to watch different things. So reading, watching different films, foreign films, British films, and TV. I fall into like habit, like this inertia of just doing things because that's always how I do it. So
Yeah.
all I'm reading is the industry's best news on the PR industry, and I'm only reading what my PR colleagues' updates are. It's just for me personally, I just needed more, and
Yeah.
there's a lot to learn from different industries and getting involved there. So I would say, yeah, reading far and wide as you can. I think it will only do you good. And yeah, think about ways to think outside the box and be inspired. I think some of the best brainstorms and best creative I've done is involving people like from different backgrounds and or people in finance or people at front of house and whatever. Just get different perspectives on things.
Mm.
Like they'll have a different view of it. I think we are in our bubble of the PR world, and but actually sometimes the great ideas are the simplest ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, so thinking outside the box a bit on creative, it's there's lots of cool ways to do it. But for me personally, what inspires me is just reading, watching, listening, things you might not ordinarily consider, even music. That's been a big inspiration for me recently too.
Okay, that's good key lessons. So make sure you read, and stay abreast of what's happening in the industry and outside, and also don't be scared to seek advice outside of your bubble. Those are some good lessons. And what advice would you give to young people of color considering entering the industry in particular?
Yeah, I think it's I think have a think about like what is it you'd like to do? What is it you're truly passionate about and interested in? I guarantee there's going to be an agency or a brand that will be able to sort of meet that demand for you. So if it's travel, if it's video games, if it's music, yeah, be really intentional with actually what is it you want to do and what is it you're interested in. Because I promise you, if you end up following the path of something you really love doing, it will feel a lot less like work and you'll really, really enjoy it. And yeah, opportunities are everywhere. I think even starting where I did PR agencies, I did completely different things. I learned so much.
Mm.
And I think learning different ways of thinking and working is fantastic. So yeah, keeping an eye on that. And also, yeah, find your groups. There are so many free resources and organizations that are very willing to support you, be there for you, and guide you, and mentor you. So yeah, figure out like who those are. I think we've listed lots of them on this podcast today. But people are really happy to listen and be there for you. People will surprise you. So if you don't be afraid to ask if there's something you want or something you need from someone. Reach up. If there's any ways we can support you, I'm always here to listen.
Yeah, great. I think that's really helpful. And as you mentioned, lots of support. Where do you go for industry support? Obviously, you've got people like us. So I assume you can stick to your little group there. Obviously there's other support out there. Just so people know, there's obviously UK Black Comp Network. We've got the Asian Network. We've got people like us. We've got the PRCA's Race and FCC Equity Board. And they've actually got a resource now, which is PRISM, which is Public Relations, Inclusion Support and Mentoring. So that is also available to Black, Asian, ethnically diverse professionals as well. So for yourself, I'm sure you can lean on your brother, you can lean on your network, which is really, really important as well.
Yeah, it's a funny one for me. When I'm really stressed and there's a lot on my mind, I actually go to people who have nothing remotely to do with our industry. That's my peaceful, happy place.
Happy place.
It's funny actually. I was on a stag a couple of months ago, and it was a really funny group of dudes who are just they do all kinds of stuff. Some of them work in admin, some of them are plumbers, electricians, whatever. Not once did anyone talk about work or the news. We just spent the entire weekend taking the piss out of each other.
Yeah, as it
It
should
gave me,
be.
yeah, and you know what? It just gave me the peace I needed. I was just like, actually
Yeah.
kind of get so caught up in my own world and
Mhm.
thinking, actually, it's fine to just be ordinary and just talk about normal shit like the football
Absolutely.
or making fun of each other. So yeah,
Yeah. Bit of
I find my
banter, a
peace.
bit of a laugh, like it's needed. It is needed. And it's good to have it, like you said, outside of the bubble of PR because everything seems like it's so urgent. It's so now, this is what's happening. And it's like, actually, we're human beings. We're here. We're having our experience. And I want to connect with some of my friends outside. And they help me to disconnect from what's happening over there, which is great.
Yeah, you've summarized it perfectly. Make sure you have those people outside the PR circle because PR circle is always everything's always urgent, everything's always
Yeah.
now, now,
Yeah.
now. So it's good to take a breather and take a rest from it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And just to remind anybody who's listening, you probably heard it before, but remember it is PR, not ER. We say that often in the industry, but remember that it is a very, very key gem to remember. So my last section for you is on mindset, which is my favorite little section. So I want to ask you, how do you deal with the internal mind war? So like, how do you manage self-limiting beliefs?
I mean, it's something that I experience practically all the time. I think people always say I look really relaxed and really calm and whatever, but I'm thinking hundreds of different things at the same time. And it does at times get overwhelming. I think it's a lot for one person to be worrying about multiple things at the same time,
Yeah,
whether it's work, family, I mean, anything outside of that. And I suppose what I've been focusing more on personally is just a lot more self-care.
yeah,
And just taking a breather and try not to be too tough on yourself. I think everyone's harshest critic is always themselves.
mhm,
Um, but actually, yeah, I think maybe as I've matured over the years, I think my early PR days were playing hard, working hard all the time. So I'd be working 9 to 5. I mean, way beyond that.
beyond
And
that, yeah,
then I'd get to like the end of the week, go out drinking quite heavily with my work friends to blow
mhm,
off steam, moan about clients, moan about, do you know what I mean, whatever.
yeah,
And then feel so exhausted on the weekend and just kind of just sleeping it off and combination of just tiredness and being hungover
mm,
and kind of just do the same thing on repeat. And I thought that's not a sustainable way to live. It's not being kind to yourself either.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe that thing comes with age, but it's actually like taking a step back and doing different things. There's different ways to do self-care. It doesn't need to result to like alcohol or big blowout or a big trip away or whatever.
mhm,
But actually, like traveling has also really grounded me.
yeah.
It's actually going somewhere completely fresh and yeah, but obviously that isn't in everyone's means. Sometimes even just going for a walk. I get so stuck to my like glued to my phone, my laptop all the time. It's just like actually just turn that shit off and just go for a walk, and it's very liberating.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for a walk, read a book. Or like me, I'm trying to get back into my art. I used to do art back in the day. So I'm like, I'm getting back into that. So yeah, it is about finding those other avenues for yourself, which feels good. So yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. Now, looking back over your journey, would you do it all over again?
Oh, like would I do PR again?
Yeah, like your entire journey where you are now, like would you change anything or like looking back over it, would you do it all over again?
You know what? Like, yeah, absolutely. It's been imperfect in lots of ways. I've learned a hell of a lot. I think I've changed a massive amount as a person, even over the years I've been in the industry. But I'm proud of, I mean, the things that I stand for and the work I've delivered, and even the very tiny impact I may have had in some people's lives in some way. So yeah, I would do it again. Absolutely. I really enjoy our industry. I think it's got a lot of promise and potential to be more welcoming, and it will do that. It will take time, but it will happen.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I've met a lot of lifelong friends. I know for sure people I'll stick with for the rest. So yeah, I don't regret anything.
That's brilliant. We like to hear that. So these are the two last questions. So first one, what's the best and worst advice you've been given Although one of the worst ones I feel like you already mentioned at the start of this interview, but as in, don't have a career in PR, go for a career in sales. But anyway, you might have another one, or that might be it. But my question is for you: what's the best and the worst advice you've been given?
Best advice someone gave me, it was a person I worked with. She's fantastic. She's just so organized, so good. Um, she said something along the lines of your currency, your contacts are basically your currency. If you've got great connections, it'll make your life a lot easier. And what she was referring to at the time was media contacts, because particularly we were as an agency, earned coverage was what we were really known for, and better that than any other agency. And that really stuck with me over the years. And I kind of applied that to lots of different things. So even before influencer marketing became so widely done, I got to know lots of great influencers, photographers, and stayed friends with them over the years. And same with journalists. A lot of journalist friends I've had for many, many years. Some of them were even I invited to my wedding. I got to know them that well. So I'd say like that's the best advice I've been given. It's just like make those connections. People can like be happy to give you their time, so you can get to know what they write about, have the right questions for them, and just get to know them. As we sort of said at the start, like we're all human beings. So, do you know what I mean? Like just get to know each other, build that relationship. So when you do pitch the story, or you need to learn something, or you need some advice, like I'm pretty sure people will be there to help you however they can. So contacts everything. I appreciate it's harder for junior people these days. There's less press to pitch to. People aren't answering their phones anymore when you call a news desk.
It's changed so much, hasn't it? I mean, there's a time when I remember I used to going out and having like lunches and stuff with journalists, and that used to be, normal. Now it's like it's hardly ever heard of. Everyone's jobs have changed, and like you said, it's a bit more difficult. But you can still build. You can still build though.
100%. It can definitely still happen. And do you know what I mean? Find out who the right press are for, the clients you're working on, or things you care about, and get to know them. Take them for lunch, take them for a coffee, or even worst case, like hop on a call with them and just ask them the right questions. And it's all about maintaining that relationship over time. So if you're working on interesting things, got a great story for them, got a great exclusive for them, keep them in mind. Because bear in mind, these people will grow with you. So they might be a junior reporter right now, but you never know where they'll be in a few years, and where you'll both be in a few years. For me, that's probably the best sort of PR advice I've had, and I still stick to this day.
Okay, that's really good. And the worst advice? Should we just use the example you gave before, or have you got another one?
Worst advice. I think it's just like trying to think of worst advice. I think when people try to persuade you to, I think just being yourself is the really important part. If people try to make you act a certain way or behave in a certain way that isn't natural to you, then I don't think you should shift how you are, or like even the code switching, for example. Like just be your authentic self, and I think you can't go wrong.
Okay, thank you. And my last question for you is: do you have any rules you've implemented to help you along your career journey?
Yeah, I think the contacts one is a really important one, and relationships. That's something I dedicate a lot of time to, get to know people, things that are on their minds, things how I can support them. Relationships are really, really important to me. I pride myself in knowing lots of people in the industry and beyond. And I dedicate a lot of time to understanding that person, listening to them and checking in with them, and almost treat it like a friendship. And it's always a two-way street. So you're not just asking someone for what they can do for you, but also how you can support them. I think it's really important that you offer that both ways. And I think our people like us rules are ones we stick by. One is everything we're trying to do is trying to enact some sort of small change. I think it's really important. We don't want to virtue signal or, do you know what I mean, say things for the sake of it. I think where we can, make things actionable. So rather than just continue to raise awareness, it's actually what are you going to do about it? That's something we stick by and try to stick by even in campaign work for clients we work with. The second thing is just joy. Like, I think it's just like life is short, man. Like, you know what I mean? You spend so much time at work, spend more time with your colleagues and in front of your laptop than you do with, your children. Yeah, exactly. Your partner, your children, your parents, or whatever. like just bring joy into it, enjoy it wherever you can. And that's what's, I think, what's taken people like us so far. It's just the joy and the electricity you see in the room and the passion. Yeah, try not to forget that. So sometimes your job might seem a bit dull and boring, but figure out ways to make it interesting and yeah, like, and being kind to yourself, really. I think that's kind of what it's about.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sheeraz. It has been lovely speaking to you. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. Now, for anyone who wants to connect with you, where can they find you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram. If they want to connect with us or the company, like, always very welcome to reach out. If there's any way we can support you, just know we're always here.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. So this has been a wonderful chat with Sheeraz Gulsher. So my dear people, I will be back very soon with some more wonderful people from the world of comms. Until then, stay safe, stay tuned, and bye for now. And thank you for listening.